good trick that the audience couldn't fully appreciate into something really remarkable. He had an illusion called iasia. An illusion, of course, you know, in the magical parlance, we mean a large cabinet or something that people can vanish from. Well, he had a skeleton cabinet, an upright cabinet, and he had a girl get in that, and they hoisted it out over the audience.
And you could see her in the cabinet while it was being hoisted.
She dropped curtains around her, but you saw her in before she dropped the curtains. It was on the rise before she dropped the curtains.
Which means she was hanging between ceiling and audience.
And it went up. This theater would have two balconies in it, you know, a high theater. And all of a sudden, he'd stand on the runway, you know, right down to the audience. He'd fire a couple of pistol shots, and the curtains and everything would fall, and the girl was gone, and there was nothing there but a skeleton cabinet.
How did the audience react? This is what's on...
Now, wait till you hear what happened. Now, when he did that on the stage, a trick like that, the audience appreciated it. It seemed it was, I mean, they could applaud and everything of that sort. Sometimes they would dismantle a cabinet, and the action and everything would arouse the audience's interest. But here the audience, as this thing happened, they just sat and looked. They were dumbfounded.
Paralyzed with awe.
Yeah. And Thurston said, "Where is she? She's gone. Those from above can look down and see that she is not in the top. Those from below can look up and see she is not in the bottom. Where is she? She is gone, just gone." The audience still sat there, just like they were frozen.
And he often ended his show with that effect in the beginning.
And when he ended it, it was
catastrophic.
He didn't know. The audience he'd take a bow and the whole thing was over.
Like my show, there's no applause.
Well, one night when he was standing there and this dead silence came on, he just stood and says, "Where is she? She is gone, just gone." And he said, "And sometimes, night after night, I stand here, gazing upward, wondering myself where she could possibly be." The audience
they just broke. Well, we'll be back. The timer's gone. We're going to be back, and we're going to discuss a legend for all time, Houdini. Thank you, folks. Walter, how did Houdini become so interested in spiritualism? Because half of his life was almost a passionate expose of the fake mediums, wasn't it?
Yes. When he started out in the 1890s, there were a lot of mediums around, and they did what was called cabinet work. They would go in and they would be locked up, and things would happen. Ghosts would appear from the cabinet, and when they'd open it again, there was the medium still tied or locked as it was. Well, Houdini learned those secrets, but he didn't want to be a medium. He knew that those particular mediums were fakes.
And what they would do to people's lives.
And so Houdini got the idea of going in cabinets and being locked, and then coming out free of the shackles and so forth.
Yes, yes.
Well, that really nonplussed him.
Yes.
Well, of course, he had many battles with the mediums as a result, and when there was, after World War I, there was a resurgence of spiritualism.
Conan Doyle lost his son.
And Conan Doyle was really overboard on it. There's no question about that.
Sherlock Holmes writer, yes.
So Houdini went around and would expose mediums.
Now, he knew, there's a great controversy, and we only have about 2.5 minutes. Before he died, and he died when, which is interesting, on what day?
On Halloween.
Halloween, a showman to the end. And yet he left a code or some ideas with his wife. And there have been claims, especially on the part of a medium who's known in this part of the world, Reverend Ford, of breaking the code. What happened? Was the code broken?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Houdini left several messages with different people, and usually they were in the form of 10 words. And one night, Ford, or one of his meetings, spoke in what he claimed was a voice of a control.
Fletcher.
Yes, and said that he had a message for Bessie Houdini, Houdini's wife, and he gave these 10 words. And she was contacted and said those were the 10 words that Houdini had left her. So they claimed that the message had come from Houdini. Now, actually, those 10 words were 10 words that they used in a mind-reading act.
And the interesting
they're in that book.
And the interesting thing about this is that the book came out
Before this happened.
1 year earlier, and I've kept this. It's now today a collector's item. On page 105
Right.
are the 10 words that are here. Now, Walter, what about a little bit of the intrigue? Because she sent a telegram to Winchell that Ford had broken it, and then there was a denial, and Ford was excommunicated from his church.
Oh, yes, well, that would be, getting into that would be very difficult. Too much detail about it, but the crux of it, I think, is this, that Ford could very readily have read the book and said, I'll take a chance on those 10 words, because even if they hadn't been her 10 code words, that would have been a remarkable thing, and he could get out of that, and it just happened that they were. So Ford then took credit for having broken the code. Well, of course, they claimed that Mrs. Houdini went along with it because she was eager to get publicity, and some people even claimed the thing was framed. I don't know that that was necessarily true. But, however, the thing fizzled out.
It did fizzle out.
But Ford was criticized very heavily for it, and several newspaper people came to it. He came to a newspaper woman's apartment to discuss it with her.
Well, some people were hidden.
And people were hidden and heard him practically say that it was just a stunt.
Talk about stunts, Walter, because we only have a few seconds. Here's the man who Bishop Pike at one point implied had communicated with his deceased son, and yet I was called in to see the film here in Canada, and it was not impressive because Pike was so upset he was given more information in his reaction. But would you tell one little anecdote in about 10 seconds as to one of the areas in which Ford held a seance, which was not on ground, but over a city?
Oh, yes. He had relievers, and they were really hanging over from the time, when they thought that there was a spirit world about 3 or 4 miles up before airplanes were flying that high. They thought it was about 50 miles up. He got a whole bunch of believers to go up in an airplane.
To hold a seance?
To hold a seance, and he got messages while he was up there 3 or 4 miles in the air.
I get messages, but they're not quite. I'm getting messages of time. Walter B. Gibson, it is one of the thrills of my life to have you here, and you are a legend in your own time. I'd like to have you back in the future. Please stay here, Walter. We'll be back in just a few seconds. Thank you. Walter. Gentlemen, come over here. These are security men, and your name is?
Brian Gamble.
Brian, where do you work?
I work for National Protective Service.
Yes, and you are Dale, because I met you before, and you work for?
Right, same people.
CJOH? Nice to have. Bill, I'm going to give you my glasses. The only problem without glasses is I suffer from a condition called blindness, and I can't really see a thing. I'm going to now duplicate an effect that was made famous in the area of escapery, and certainly, in some respects, duplicated the conditions that Houdini would often work under. This is a mail bag, and gentlemen, it is indeed a secure mail bag. I think you'll verify. If you'll, Dale, take that bottom. It is made out of heavy canvas. There are no openings. As a matter of fact, the stitching is of a very strong cord. The only thing that could be done is with, I guess, a very, very sharp knife to extricate oneself. If you'll hold that for a moment, please, I'm going to ask you to take the handcuffs. It's Brian? Brian. Fine. Before we even go any further, you have padlocks, don't you? You have one on you? Would you take it out, please? This is a bar, which, if I may explain, gentlemen, could lock me in here so that no one could get out. You just move the bar, the kind of steel bar that would be used to... You see how I'm doing this? You understand, Dale and Brian?
Yeah.
It'd become impossible unless I, according to Conan Doyle, when he theorized about how Houdini did these things, unless I dematerialize and I don't go in that direction. We'll put one of the padlocks on, if you will, put it through the bar, and snap it shut. We're going to have some tape, but I don't think we even have... Someone will go back to my dressing area and get the masking tape. When I am inside, would you put tape over this, a piece of tape, because I will be inside the bag. And actually, with that in mind, it will be impossible for me to break through. May I have that very, very quickly? Thank you, Bill. Matter of fact, you can put that over. I can have the whole reel of tape because they will need it later on also. Now, lay this here for now before you put the other one on. Would you place the handcuffs on me, please? You can push them all the way through. Just push them through. These are American handcuffs. They're legitimate handcuffs. My brother, being a law enforcement officer, verified that. And maybe you can place one of my hands in it. I'll just put my wrist inside and the other wrist in as well. And I want to tell you Nobody knows what it feels like to be handcuffed until they are, and I hope this is the only time in my life when it will be necessary. This is, if anyone's looking in, I'm not being taken away. Oh, that was an interesting, it's all right, my friend. The color is the lack of blood. Now, if you will, you have the key there. Would you put some, one of the pieces of tape over each hole? Tear one, just tear part of that piece off. Place it over that one, if you will. And one there. And why don't you take a marking pencil, if you will, that there, please. And just pull the end off. Be right here. Pull that top off. Right there. Where I marked my finger, you can mark the tape with any initial. My finger is marked so that there's no exchange. The initials are X. Obviously, you just came over from the country. All right. Would you now place the bag here so I can climb into it? Open it, if you will, so that I can step down. Unless I step to the bottom, I'll tend to fall over. This is really, in many respects, paralyzing because of the heat. And I am truly locked in here. You'll take the bar. You have the other padlock. And when I am inside, I'll ask you to put it through, if you will, please. Or let me kneel rather than having you take me over. And then, gentlemen, you go on from there. The cabinet will then be closed at your own disposal, please, if you will, whenever you're ready. And Bill Luxton will then time things, because I will give myself 4 minutes, 30 seconds, Bill. Did you hear that, Bill?
I did, Kreskin.
4 minutes, 30 seconds. All right, continue, gentlemen, whenever you're ready.
Guards, if you'll make sure that is pushed, the curtain is pushed right around the cabinet, please. Completely? All right. I'm starting the clock now, Kreskin. 5 seconds have elapsed. As Kreskin has said, this is one of Houdini's major tests done in the presence of 2 law enforcement officers, being duplicated tonight on the Amazing World of Kreskin. 30 seconds. And of course, Houdini did not have to contend with the heat of a television studio. And in our walkthrough this afternoon, for camera purposes, Kreskin found that bag incredibly hot, unbearably so. The 1 minute mark. Remember that the locks are on the outside and are sealed. Kreskin is handcuffed. They too are sealed and initialed. We have just passed the 1 minute and 30 second mark. Kreskin has set a time limit of 4 minutes and 30 seconds for this test. The locks, incidentally, supplied from an outside source. 2 minutes and 5 seconds.
There you are.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Gentlemen, could you come over here? Did you check that everything is locked as it was? The padlocks are not broken in any way? You can examine. It is completely sealed. Ladies and gentlemen, may I just say this? I'm known as a mentalist, not an escape artist, and I do not believe in reincarnation. So if I may give you the last phrase, the last sentence of an introduction that Walter B. Gibson once wrote on Houdini's work. He said, there is only one Houdini, and he is gone. Be the good Lord willing, I'll see you again next week. Goodbye, everybody.
While in Ottawa,